Hello, everyone. It's my distinct honor to present to you guys my analysis on Argentina's inability to escape the middle income trap. Abstract. When the issue of climate change is brought about to the general public, it is often a global disaster. Ironically, many people are deliberately unaware of the global climate disaster due to its wide breadth. To better frame the threats of climate change, there needs to be a more focus on national or local economics. This paper uses framework of the middle income trap to examine the effects of climate change on Argentina's agriculture industry and national infrastructure. Through analysis, it is found that the fluctuations of Argentina's high income and middle income status closely correlates with climate change. Of the threats that cast a shadow over the world, climate change is arguably the greatest. Despite the hazards it presents to humanity, climate change is seen as a political myth, a problem for future generations to solve. One of the problems with climate change is its image that manifests in people. After all, making the world a little warmer will certainly make more people happy. However, what is often forgotten is the economic cost of global warming and how essentially stymies economic progress. South America, with a number of nations stuck in the middle income trap, continues to linger there, not only because of politics, geography, and education system, but also because of climate change, the latter of which has become an increasing factor for Argentina, a country that has regressed into middle income status that is exacerbated by climate change, leaving a stranded line between middle income and high income status. This paper will be analyzing the impacts of climate change on Argentina and how it hinders the nation in fully escaping the middle income trap. The World Bank defines the middle income trap as a situation where per capita income fluctuates between 10,000 and 12,000 USD. Countries that possess a middle income status have a chance of economic stagnation or even potentially sliding back into low income. The middle income term itself has come under some scrutiny, especially with China's economic success despite being a middle income country. However, it can also be seen as an outlier instead of being heralded as a redefinition of middle income country. Moreover, there have been arguments by some economists. In fact, some economists have proposed to change the definition of a middle-income country, raising the upper threshold of per capita income to $15,000. Regardless of the definitions, Argentina has been one of the two countries to escape the middle-income trap in the 21st century, and the only one that has not slid back into the trap as Greece did during its debt crisis. Falling back into or staying in the middle-income status could result in two possibilities: an economy that reaches a high level of income and countries to thrive with growth sustained at a lower rate, or one of permanent stagnation or slow decline into poverty. Argentina's economic vulnerabilities lie in its dependency on industries and infrastructures that are particularly vulnerable in climate change. The agriculture industry in the fertile Pampas region makes up for more than 20% of its gross domestic product. Neighboring cities like Santa Fe are in turn relying on these agricultural resources to refine and produce products for export. This large intertwined system has come under threat due to climate change, with the environmental duress lowering its yield as high as 30%, and the unpredictability has put a strain on the growing. This large intertwined system has come under threat due to climate change, with the environmental duress lowering its yield as high as 30%, and the unpredictability has put a strain on the growing Argentinian economy. Climatic shift come coupled with extreme heat and unmanageable precipitation that is constantly damaging infrastructure and slowing production. All of it is putting the Argentinian economy at risk. And now we move on to changes in precipitation and flooding. Flatland suited for agriculture is rare in mountainous and coastal nations like Argentina. The Pampas region, famed for its agriculture output, has faced inconsistent production since the 80s due to weather instability caused by climate change. Commercial agriculture is precise, with yields projected by pound year by year in order to maximize harvest and export potential. Inconsistent volume results in GDP in a country that relies on the field for 1/5 of its economic growth. Flatland has made the area vulnerable to changes in hydrology in the area. The Pampas are surrounded by the Paraguay, Paraná, and Uruguay rivers. The benefit to agriculture is obvious, but it also leaves the Pampas particularly vulnerable to environmental damage. Climate change has been blamed for changes in participation in the area. Since the 1960s, the median rainfall has increased by nearly threefold, going from around 50 millimeter per annum to 150 millimeter. This will not be an issue if the change was consistent and crops could be changed to meet changing environment, but the greatest issue that comes with extreme participation is unpredictability. A simple issue that stems from this is flooding. Research has shown that during years of heavy rainfall, rivers' discharges have increased by as much as 35%. Being adjacent to three major river systems has resulted in mass flooding in years that have wiped out nearly 20 to 30% of annual yields. The extremely flat land in the Pampas not only makes the damage worse. Making matters worse is that mass flooding are often followed by dire droughts that prevents farmers from actually preparing for sowing or harvesting the next year. Agriculture is only one side of the story. The flooding in the Pampas region actually has adverse effects on the manufacturing aspect of Argentina's economy. Several major Argentina cities are adjacent or part of the Pampas region, such as Santa Fe and the city of Buenos Aires. These cities with more than 3 million in population work in turning Pampas harvest into exported goods. It is essentially the industrial and commercial hub of the nation. Being so close to so many rivers basins actually make the city vulnerable to climate change due to flooding. The floods have a dual impact in regards to the city. Floods have been a regular occurrence in the region since the early 2000s, and there have been instances of a third of Santa Fe being flooded, causing massive infrastructure and large casualties. What is also important is the amount of destruction the floods creates in terms of income and GDP, though the figures themselves have been scarce. Moreover, the added participation have been shown to increase nearly 3.5% for every 1 degree Celsius the temperature in the Pampas increases. The total damage and cost to the Argentina economy has been 22.5 billion USD since 1980s, accounting for 58% of all economic damages caused by natural disasters between 1966 and 2015. And next, we move on to extreme temperatures for agriculture and infrastructures. While changes in participation have already caused enough problems for the Argentina economy, the country and its industry also have to contend with rising temperatures. The region has already experienced high enough temperatures for it to be classified as extreme. Since 2013, temperatures in the summer have soared, with temperatures regularly rising above 40 degrees Celsius, making the country one of the hottest in the world. The extreme heat has had adverse effect on the nation's plant biosphere, severely impacting the agriculture sector. Forest fires and droughts have affected harvests and even resulted in temporal collapses of the region's power grids. Forest fires and droughts have affected harvests and even resulted in temporary collapses of the region's power grid. The Pampas region produces wheat and corn while providing grazing land for the country's most valued export product, beef. The rising temperature of the last decade have had adverse impacts on the region. Temperatures have been increasing since the 1960s, with maximum, minimum, and mean temperature in the Pampas increasing by more than 1 degree Celsius. Warm days, warm nights, summer days, tropical nights, and both the coldest nights and days exhibit a considerably positive trends, implicating the presence of warming signal. What's more, frost days and cold nights demonstrate a negative pattern. The issue that stems from the high temperature is their effects on soil. Despite the extreme participation, the heat can dehydrate soil and put pressure on the region's water supplies. The increase in temperature, which influences crop flowering, delays the growing season, and severely shortens the critical period for growth, resulting in a decrease in crop yields. High temperatures are not the only problem. Even though Argentina has not suffered from intense winter, the cooler spring are a parallel issue for the Pampas. The 1 degree Celsius medium increase has resulted in far less yields from wild plant to the major wheat crops. For instance, it is revealed that in Mexico, good wheat yields are substantially correlated with a low average minimum temperature, and they propose that a low average minimum temperature has a significant impact on yield. For instance, it is revealed that in Mexico, good wheat yields are substantially correlated with a low average minimum temperature, and they propose that a low average minimum temperature has a significant impact on wheat yields. And next, we move on to infrastructure and climate change. The adverse effects of climate change are typically thought of as causing damage to a region's environment, but the unpredictable weather in Argentina is a root for Argentina's infrastructure degradation. There's roughly 240,000 kilometers of road in addition to a similarly large network of railway, all of which connect to air and water infrastructure. The nation's network provides internal mobility and connect Argentina to its neighbors. The complex transportation sector is critical to the nation's economic growth and development since it facilitates access to Unfortunate hallmarks of Argentina's transportation infrastructure are poor construction and a limited capacity to withstand natural disasters. Climate change-induced hydrological extremes exacerbate these issues by routinely disrupting transportation and increasing expenses. In addition to the economic and social consequences, these disruptions impede 45 million people's access to service, transit, and good export. What's more, trends of multifaceted infrastructure damage are already being foreseen due to these climatic and meteorological shifts. Rising temperatures have been responsible for 58% of the economic damage caused by natural disaster between 1966 and 2015. It is expected that climate change-related worries are expected to have a 4.5 to 7% influence on Argentina's GDP, and transportation infrastructure failures due to climatic increase will cause a decrease in individual income. Another example of climatic interruption to Argentina's economy made with their infrastructure deterioration can be seen no farther than the numerous prime instances of power grid failure in Buenos Aires, the capital of Argentina. While the region of Argentina and its neighboring countries were no strangers to the prevalence of power grid shutdowns, local residents, including government officials, have described its recent case as unprecedented, leaving at least 700,000 people without electricity and trains, subway, and all other transportation services were halted. Undoubtedly, the episodes of historical heatwave are the predominant culprits to blame, but it's also evident that such calamities are also a product of climate change. Rising ocean temperatures and heat waves have a negative impact on the functioning of power plants by deteriorating the transmission of their cooling system. Transmission lines are nothing but just wires with restricted capacity. In truth, when the temperature increases, the capacity declines. This is compounded by the fact that when the transmission line transports a large amount of power, it heats up. The drooping of the line is caused by the expansion of the copper conductor in the line. If the line sags too far, it will come into contact with ground vegetation, resulting in a short circuit and the line's incapacity to further develop. If the line sags too far, it will come into contact with ground vegetation, resulting in a short circuit and the line's incapacity to further deliver energy. Because one line is no longer operational, another line must pick up the burden, but they, too, become overloaded and vulnerable to the same problem of overheating, which ultimately goes out of operation. And next, we move on to Argentina's climate trap. As mentioned earlier, the role that climate change plays in terms of destroying the economic foundation of the nation and per capita income of its citizens has been loosely explored. However, many of the links that have been made in South Asia and East Asia easily apply to the Argentina context. Argentina itself treads the line between a middle-income and high-income nation. This in particular places Argentina in a precarious position because its position as a high-income country is insecure. Extreme heat is particularly devastating to Argentina's agricultural sector, which employs roughly 7% of its population. One of the reasons why the decrease in yields has not necessarily ended with a collapse in the Argentina economy has been a move up to crops that are more responsive to high heat. But with temperature increasing consistently, several, like soybeans, have faced declining yields as well. Another attempt to decrease the impact has been the redistribution of labor, as Argentina has tried to modernize and automate more of its agriculture sector. But the results are ultimately mixed, as not all the workers leaving the industry are able to find well-paid employment. Of course, none of this actually deals with the possibility that a few extra degrees in temperature could bring the entire industry to collapse. The outcomes of extreme temperatures are more profound when these issues affect infrastructure. Flooding and extreme precipitation clearly affect agriculture as well, but there are few solutions to the issue that are not rectified by the same attempts to mitigate temperatures. The Pampas area is surrounded by a number of the country's largest cities, all of which are engaged in the manufacture, development, and commercialization of the region's boundary. The extra water in the region is causing regular damage to roads, buildings, factories, and power stations, all of which bring industry to a standstill. Even those that go beyond agriculture itself, studies of East and South Asia have already pointed to the damage that climate change has on infrastructure, and Argentina is not immune to similar effects. Even though Argentina has tried to reroute labor to other industries, any that is connected to the agriculture supply chain is likely to be affected, decreasing income across the board as production and shipment are halted. The blackouts have exacerbated Argentina's deepening economic crisis, which had driven about a third of the population into poverty, skyrocketed interest rates, and caused the peso to collapse against dollars, resulting in protests around the nation. Changes that can affect the sustainability of resource development or manufacture will ultimately place Argentina at risk of slipping back into the middle income. This is much like how the debt crisis essentially placed Greece back into the trap after it had escaped. Argentina has largely tried to mitigate the latter issue by printing money in order to make up for the shortfall and stoppage. But borrowing against an economy that may be on the edges of a major recession can ultimately undo the progress the country has made. And now we move on to the conclusion. What's next? Argentina is on the verge of being middle to high income due to its unskilled labor force. However, few will realize the underlying and yet substantial consequence of climate change on its major economic pillar, agriculture. A country's economy that relies predominantly on exports of agriculture is clearly affected economically by shifts in climates that results in drastic precipitation, infrastructure degradation, and unprecedented heat waves. Although the country's per capita income has risen, given the current climate change problems and the adverse impacts that accompanies them, it is surprising to discover that only a few constructive policy recommendations have been featured on how to avoid or move beyond it. With that, there is still a lot of unexplored avenues of study that open up in light of my conclusion, namely, how or what actions can be taken in battling the economic threats cast by the shadows of climate change, simultaneously designing an ultimate solution for affected countries in a collective effort. Despite the study being majorly focused on the middle income trap and what the underlying factors are causing it, one worthwhile next step would be to focus on low-income countries and how tied their economic progress to its climate change. This could be important for high-income countries in Europe or North America in regards to how their industries or infrastructures can be affected as well, given that the context of Argentina may be eye-opening, but cannot be easily transplanted to another setting without a whole new study. Thank you, everyone. And thank you guys for taking the time to listen. And here is my email if you have any question. And here's my credits for my pictures. Once again, I appreciate everyone for listening. Thank you.